I woke up to shame pinned on my mailbox. She waved a clipboard like scripture, but the county map tore her story apart. Her smile cracked the moment my deed claimed her patio. Let me take you back. I still remember that Memorial Day morning when I walked out with my coffee and found a bright orange notice flapping against my mailbox. The air still smelled of summer rain from the night before, and my old porch boards creaked under my slippers as I stepped out. The flags were up on nearly every house along our street, some stiff and starched, some faded from years of the Texas sun. My driveway gleamed faintly from the fresh sealer I had rolled just 2 days earlier. I'd been proud of it, honestly. After decades of firefighting and a bad knee, little projects like sealing the drive gave me something to fuss over. That's why the sight of that orange paper jolted me like a false alarm bell. The tape rattled in the breeze, and for a split second I thought maybe it was a flyer about the town parade. But the bold print at the top violation notice was enough to sour my coffee. I pulled it down, scanned the words. Unauthorized driveway modification. Expansion beyond HOA guidelines. Remedy required. Expansion. I let out a dry laugh. The slab had been there since 1984. All I had done was roll a coat of sealant to keep the summer rains from chewing at the cracks. Across the street, I heard Martha's porch swing creak. She lived in that swing, a book or a crossword in her lap, her cat curled at her feet. She lifted her head now, peering over the rim of her glasses. What's she done now? She called across the way, her voice half amused, half weary. Before I could answer, the click of sensible heels on concrete made me turn. Karen Dutton marched up the sidewalk like a general on inspection, a leather clipboard pressed tight to her chest as if it were a holy relic. Her lipstick was too bright for morning, her eyes sharp and rehearsed. I knew what was coming before she even opened her mouth. "Mr. Mallory," she said, tilting her head, "just so we've had a complaint regarding your driveway." "Complaint?" I held up the paper. "This thing says I widened it." "Karen, I just sealed it. Same driveway, same width it's been for 30 years. She gave me a smile that wasn't a smile. "Resurfacing changes the dimensions. It alters the appearance. That requires prior approval." She tapped her clipboard with a red pen, the sound sharp as a gavel. "HOA rules are HOA law." "Mr. Mallory." From across the street, Martha gave a theatrical cough. Again, Karen, she muttered, loud enough to travel. The swing creaked again as she settled back, clearly preparing to watch the show. I felt my ears burn. "HOA law," I said. "Last I checked, Karen, there's state law, county ordinances, and common sense, but no one elected you sheriff of concrete." Her pen scratched something across the top of the notice. She looked up with eyes gleaming like she had been waiting for me to bite. "I've already called the county survey office," she announced as if she were unveiling a magic trick. "They'll confirm the encroachment." I swallowed. Encroachment. It was my own driveway. Still, I could feel the weight of her words, the way she wielded them like a fire axe at a kitchen blaze. I had spent my career spotting when smoke was about to become flame, and I knew then that Karen wasn't finished. She was just warming up. My coffee had gone cold in my hand. I set the mug down on the porch rail and folded the orange paper, sliding it into my pocket like evidence. If there was going to be a fight, I would keep my papers straight. Martha leaned forward in her swing. "Don't let her rattle you, Henry," she called. She did the same thing with the Johnsons' fence. Said their pickets were an inch too tall. Lord help us, she even measured them herself. Karen spun on her heel, the clipboard clutched to her side. "Thank you for your commentary, Martha," she snapped. "But this is official HOA business." The exchange made me think of every small-town squabble I'd ever seen, from church bazaar committees to bake sale boards. Always someone puffing their chest, confusing power with authority. I took a slow breath, the smell of wet concrete and cut grass filling my lungs. That was when I heard it. A low engine, steady, unhurried. From the corner of my eye, I saw a white county truck slowly turning down our street. 2 mornings later, I walked into our local diner, hoping for pancakes, and instead found Karen bragging into her phone for the whole place to hear. The bell over the glass door jingled as I stepped inside, the familiar scent of frying bacon and hot syrup wrapping around me like an old quilt. Red vinyl booths lined the walls, worn but polished, and paper flags still hung above the counter from Memorial Day. This place hadn't changed in 40 years. It was where folks came not just to eat, but to collect the town's pulse. You could walk in needing coffee and walk out knowing who sold their truck, whose grandson enlisted, or which garden club lost their prize roses. That morning, though, all eyes were already drawn to Karen. She stood near the front phone, pressed to her ear clipboard in the other hand as always, as if she couldn't make a call without it. Her voice was sharp and loud-pitched, just enough to carry across every table. "Yes, I need a survey on Lot 14, urgent violation," she declared. Forks paused midway to mouths. The diner had a rhythm, but she'd broken it like a drum out of step. I caught the glance of Pete, one of the old veterans in the corner booth, and he shook his head, muttering something under his breath. Even the waitress, Sheila, kept her ears cocked while she poured coffee into the nearest mug. When she turned to me, pot in hand, I tipped her with a smile. "Morning, Henry," she said. "You want your usual stack of pancakes," I told her, but my eyes were still on Karen. I slid into Martha's booth without asking. She was already there with her tea, stirring it absently, her gaze fixed on Karen's performance. "She's winding herself up," Martha said quietly, leaning toward me. "And dragging you with her," I sighed. "She claims I've widened a driveway. Next thing you know, she'll say I've paved over her roses." Martha's lips pressed thin. "Henry, you should know something. Old Hawthorne, he owned your lot before you moved in. He left some odd papers, deeds that didn't line up right. Folks said he was sloppy, but sloppy deeds have a way of sticking around." Her words made the coffee in my stomach churn. Before I could ask more, another voice drifted from the corner. Sheriff Langston sat with his usual circle of veterans, a man with a weathered face and calm eyes. He'd been listening, of course he had. "Old deeds have long memories, Henry," he said, his tone steady, not unkind. "Be careful what gets dug up." That made me sit back uneasy. Karen had ended her call by then, tucking the phone into her bag with a little flourish. She slapped the clipboard down on the counter like it was the closing gavel of a courtroom. "We'll settle this soon," she announced, loud enough for every whisper to stop dead. Sheila arched an eyebrow as she refilled my cup. Settle what she asked, but Karen only gathered her things and strutted out satisfied with her audience. The chatter in the diner resumed louder now, like water surging after a dam breaks. Whispers followed me all the way home, past lawns still decorated with flags and hydrangeas just beginning to bloom. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself it was only noise. But that evening, when the mail truck groaned to a stop at the curb, I knew before I opened the box that something more was waiting. There, it was a crisp envelope stamped County Survey Office. My name printed clean, my address beneath it. Inside, a single letter, Notice of Inspection, June 10th. I stood with that envelope in hand, wondering what exactly Karen thinks she's walking me into. June 10th came hotter than a frying pan. I woke to the sight of a county survey truck pulling up to my drive, orange vests stepping out. The cicadas were already humming in the noon heat, their shrill chorus rolling through the live oaks. My driveway shimmered in the sun, the fresh sealer glinting like a mirror. I stepped outside with my hat pulled low and a coffee cup still warm in my hand. Two men climbed down from the truck, their boots crunching on the gravel. One carried a measuring wheel, the other shouldered a tripod. Their orange vests blazed against the pale limestone backdrop. Behind them came Karen, not in uniform, but looking every bit the commander. She had her arms folded, clipboard hugged to her chest, barking directions like she was the one who'd sent the truck. "Yes, right there, gentlemen," she said. "That's the spot. Measure it against the HOA map, and you'll see the violation clear as day." Neighbors had gathered almost instantly. It was a small-town thing, word traveled faster than any siren. Folding chairs sprouted along the edge of Martha's lawn like mushrooms after rain. Folks brought iced tea and lemonade, fanning themselves with church bulletins. Martha herself sat steady in her porch swing, one eyebrow raised, watching as if it were a play written just for her. I greeted the surveyors. "Morning. Henry Mallory," I said, offering my hand. Jenkins, a square-jawed man, nodded politely. Alvarez, slimmer and younger, gave a friendlier smile. They got right to work, pulling long metal tapes and planting small flags. Karen trailed them like a shadow. "This is simple," she declared to anyone who would listen. He expanded that driveway without approval. Clear encroachment. HOA rules are rules. I slipped into my house and returned with a folder, the edges worn from years of storage. Inside was the deed copy I'd been given when I bought the place paper, browned with age-type paint. I held it out to Alvarez. "This is the county's record. It's old, but it's what I have." He studied it, comparing it against the printed HOA map Karen had thrust into his hands. His brow furrowed. "These don't match cleanly," he murmured. "County shows one thing, HOA map another." A ripple of chuckles passed among the neighbors. "Karen sure looks nervous now," someone muttered loud enough to earn a glare from her. Karen leaned in close to Alvarez, her voice sharp. "Just mark it how the HOA shows. That's the authority here. Alvarez straightened his expression, cooling. "Ma'am, the county records supersede any HOA documents. That's our job." He paced to the edge of the lawn, squinting at the ground. After a moment, he dropped to one knee and began digging at a patch of dirt with a small trowel. The crowd leaned forward as though the curtain had risen. A few shovelfuls later, he struck metal. When he pulled it free, sunlight flashed off the steel. A stake, weathered but firm, stamped with the unmistakable county seal. Exactly where Karen had sworn my driveway was out of bounds. Martha clapped once, sharp and satisfied. The rest of the neighbors let out murmurs that blended relief and amusement. Karen's face flushed red as her authority slipped through her fingers. She fumbled with her phone jaw tight. "Get President Briggs down here, we'll sue if we have to." 2 days later, the clubhouse filled with folding chairs and muttering residents. At the front table sat President Briggs with a binder thick enough to choke a mule. Fluorescent lights buzzed like summer locusts, tinting everyone a shade paler than usual. The bulletin board on the side wall sagged under years of notices: lost cats, yard sales Halloween, potlucks bleached to faint pumpkins. Near the back, a coffee urn steamed, sending up the smell of burnt roast and paper cups. People moved in low murmurs, then found seats and folded their arms the way churchgoers do before a sermon that might step on toes. I slipped into a chair on the aisle. The old deed envelope pressed a rectangle against my ribs, heavier with each breath. It had lived in my file box since I bought the house, tucked between appliance warranties and insurance renewals. I hadn't cracked it in years, but its weight seemed to grow with every glance Karen threw over her shoulder. She sat to Briggs's right, clipboard shining under the fluorescent hum-red lipstick, perfect chin high. The sheriff leaned against the back wall hat hooked on his thumb posture, easy eyes alert. Martha had claimed the front row, a little spiral notepad in her lap, pen ready as if she were the town stenographer. I caught her eye, and she gave me a small nod that felt steadier than the chair beneath me. Briggs tapped the binder. The room settled. "We'll bring this meeting to order," he said in his calm radio voice. "Item 1, routine approvals. Item 2, landscaping tender. Item 3, Article 12.4. He flipped to a tab, cleared his throat. Article 12.4, Mr. Mallory's driveway exceeds permitted boundaries. A rustle, a cough. Somewhere a paper cup cracked in a tight fist. Karen leaned toward the mic before anyone could blink. "Survey confirms it," she said, crisp as a cheerleader's snap. "Visual expansion plus resurfacing that changes the appearance beyond our uniform standards. Non-compliant." I stood feeling every eye turn a weight I hadn't felt since the first time I addressed a crowd after a house fire. The trick had always been to breathe first, then speak. "With respect," I said, voice even the county survey stake didn't match your map. A few heads tilted. Karen's jaw tightened. Briggs steepled his fingers. "Mr. Mallory, we understand there was some discussion on site," he said. "However, the board relies on our standing diagrams for uniformity. Variances need approval prior to modifications." "Modifications," I said. I rolled a coat of sealer to keep the rain off. "The slab hasn't changed since Ronald Reagan." A ripple of laughter died on Karen's glare. Briggs turned a page. "Regardless, the board has to consider encroachment. It is the board's position that the driveway's appearance and effective width exceed our standards. Under Article 12.4, we can levy a fine for each day of non-compliance. If the fine remains unpaid, it can secure as a lien against the property. If the lien is not cured, the board may pursue further legal remedies." The words fell like small stones into a pond. Lien. Legal remedies. My mouth went dry. I saw the sheriff shift his weight by the back door. "Mr. President," I said, keeping my tone slow with the county stake in the ground and a clerk willing to stamp the plat. "Wouldn't it make sense to look at that before you fine me? I didn't pull the envelope yet. No need to show my cards until there was a place to play them." Karen's laugh was a quick, bright sound with no humor in it. "We can't run the community on rumors about stakes and stamps," she said. "We run it on our bylaws. Everyone else manages to follow them." Martha scribbled something and then spoke without looking up. "The Johnsons followed them last year and still got a citation because Karen measured their pickets with a ruler she bought at the craft store." Chuckles again, less timid this time. Briggs rapped the table lightly. "Let's keep remarks directed to the chair." Sheriff Langston lifted his chin. "Mr. President," he said, not much louder than a conversation which made the room lean in. "Careful, HOA authority ends where county law begins." The words landed with the weight of a stop sign. "You can enforce covenants. You can't redraw the county's lines." Briggs took that in with an unreadable expression. "Of course," he said slow, "we have no intention of stepping beyond our authority. but we will enforce our standards." Karen seized the opening. "Which means fines," she said, turning back to the crowd selling it like cable. "He'll receive written notice. If he pays promptly, we'll show leniency. If he doesn't, well, liens are unfortunate, but responsibility is responsibility." I watched faces. The Caldwells, who had applauded rules since the day they moved in, were nodding along, lips pursed in righteous agreement. A young mother bounced a baby on her knee and kept her eyes lowered like if she wasn't careful she'd be the next one up there. Neighbors I'd known for years avoided my gaze. That hurt more than I expected. "May I speak?" I asked. Briggs gestured to the mic. I took 2 steps forward, felt the paper of the envelope slide against my ribs. "My father taught me to keep things simple," I said. "If the county says the line is here, then the line is here. If your map says different, maybe your map is wrong. Let's look before we fine." Karen's smile was all enamel. You had your chance to apply for approval. For sealing concrete, for altering the appearance, she snapped. For contributing to a non-uniform look that drags down property values. We have rules. She brandished the clipboard like a flag. We apply them fairly and consistently. "Consistently," Martha said under her breath, but the mic still caught it. A tremor of amusement passed through the front rows. Briggs closed his binder halfway, a thoughtful move. "Here's what I propose," he said. "We issue the initial fine as required by policy. Mr. Mallory will have a standard window 7 days to cure the violation or appeal in writing. If the appeal is received, we suspend additional fines until the hearing. If not, fines continue and may become a lien. This protects the association while allowing the homeowner due process." I exhaled. It wasn't generous, but it was a path at least. Karen leaned into her mic. "And if he appeals, we expect documentation that supports his claim, not rumors about stakes and memories." "I'll bring documentation," I said. The envelope grew heavier still, as if the past were filling it moment by moment. Briggs scanned the room. All in favor of the proposed course. Hands rose. More than enough. Opposed? A sprinkling. He nodded. "Motion carries. Mr. Mallory, you will receive written notice of the fine and instructions for appeal by close of business today." Martha turned in her chair and raised her hand like a schoolgirl. "Will the board also review whether the HOA map is as Henry suggested and accurate Briggs considered? We can request the files from the county for comparison, but until then, the map we have is the map we use." The sheriff spoke again lazily like he was commenting on the weather. "Nothing wrong with requesting the county file," he said. "Might save you time and embarrassment." Karen's nostrils flared. "Sheriff, with respect, this is association business, and the association's business ends at the property line," he said, "which is exactly what you're arguing about." Briggs raised both hands in a calming gesture. "Thank you, Sheriff. The point is taken. We'll proceed with notice allow for appeal and review county records. Meeting adjourned on item 3. He wrapped the binder shut. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder in the sudden scrape of chair legs. Conversations broke out like a dozen little fires. Karen didn't go far. She took 2 steps and then turned, slapping her clipboard on the table so hard it made the microphone squeal. The sound cut through the chatter. "We'll see you in court, Mr. Mallory," she announced, triumphant, as if she'd delivered her closing argument and won. I stood there feeling oddly calm the way I used to feel stepping into smoke, eyes open. Breath measured the world narrowed to what I could carry and what I could do. Martha brushed past and patted my sleeve. "Don't let her blow you off the road," she whispered. "Hot air's still just air." At the coffee urn I poured a half cup and didn't drink it. The sheriff drifted near. "You'll file the appeal?" he asked. "Yes." "Do it quick," he said. "And if you've got anything old in that folder that looks like a plat or a transfer, make 3 copies. 1 for the board, 1 for the clerk, 1 for your pocket." He tapped his chest where his pocket would be. "Things disappear when folks get flustered." "Thank you," I said. He nodded and drifted off again, the hat dangling from his fingers, his expression saying more than his words. Outside, the sun struck like a hammer. A small cluster of neighbors approached as I walked toward my truck. "Sorry about all that," said a man I'd known since the 4th of July parade where he once helped me untangle bunting from the fire engine. Briggs is good at sounding reasonable when he's already decided. Rules are rules. Mrs. Caldwell inserted gently with the smile of someone who always sat in the front pew. "They keep everything nice, do they?" Martha said, materializing at my elbow. "Or do people keep everything nice?" The Caldwells shifted, then excused themselves. I watched them go and felt the familiar tug, the desire to avoid a fight to keep neighborly peace. But the envelope bumped my ribs again, and I knew we were past the point of pretending this was a trim that needed paint. We were in the studs now. At home, I set the notice on the kitchen table and wrote the appeal on lined paper, neat block letters like I'd used on incident reports. I dispute the encroachment allegation I wrote. County stake found on June 10th contradicts HOA map. I request board review of county plat and deed. When I finished, I stared at the envelope. The past has a way of thickening when you summon it. I washed my hands and dried them slow like a surgeon preparing for a delicate cut. Then I poured a finger of iced tea into a glass for courage, though my hand still shook. That night at home, I finally opened the old deed envelope. The words nearly make me drop my glass. Parcel includes Lot 15A. By mid-June, even my mailbox felt nervous. Karen marched across the clubhouse floor waving papers like parade flags and announced the board had voted to sue me. The smell of cinnamon rolls and slow-cooked brisket drifted in from across the street where the church bazaar was in full swing. Through the clubhouse windows, I could see balloons tied to folding tables, kids tugging their parents toward cotton candy, and ladies from the quilting circle laughing behind a display of patchwork throws. But inside the clubhouse, the mood was nothing like a Saturday fair. The folding chairs were lined up military straight, the fluorescent lights buzzed steady, and the bulletin board groaned under layers of faded notices. The coffee urn steamed again in the back as if it knew bad news would always need caffeine. Karen's heels clicked sharp across the linoleum. She waved her clipboard with one hand and the new papers with the other, a one-woman parade. Her smile had the glow of victory. "The board has spoken," she said loud enough to drown the hum of the lights. "Mr. Mallory will now face formal action. We cannot allow one man's carelessness to undermine our standards." President Briggs adjusted his tie voice lower and smoother. Per Article 12.4, the Association has voted to authorize daily fines for non-compliance. If those fines remain unpaid, the board will proceed with a lien. If the lien remains unresolved, we are prepared to file suit. He looked down at his binder as if the words were too heavy to carry by eye. I steadied myself in my chair. My voice, when I spoke, was calm enough, though my palms sweated. "You speak of surveys," I said. "What I want is the county's report, not your summary. If the stake in my yard carries the county seal, then the county is the authority." Karen snapped. The county survey confirmed what we already knew. She slapped the papers on the table, the echo cracking through the room. Encroachment, expansion, violation. From the second row, the Caldwells rose together as if rehearsed. Mrs. Caldwell's blouse had little embroidered stars that shimmered under the lights. "We must support order," she said. "Without it, we all suffer. Property values, pride, everything slips." Her husband nodded vigorously. Applause started from Karen's row, short, eager claps like kindling catching fire. Some heads turned away, though uncomfortable with the show. I scanned the faces. A few friends avoided my eye, unwilling to stand between sides. The sheriff wasn't here this time. His absence felt like a chair pulled out from under me. My chest ached with the familiar helplessness of a man outnumbered. Then Martha slid into the chair beside me, as calm as if she'd wandered in for coffee. In her lap was a small paper plate of cookies, sugar dust rising in little clouds as she set it between us. "You'll need these," she whispered. Her eyes twinkled the way they had when she'd corrected Karen at the mailbox weeks back. Then she tucked a photograph into my palm. It was a Polaroid, edges curled, colors faded to soft pastels. A man, Hawthorne the prior owner, stood with one boot planted beside a wooden post I didn't recognize. He leaned on it, grinning, a younger neighbor in the background waving an American flag. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "Old box in my attic," Martha murmured. "He gave it to my late husband after a barbecue. Said it marked the true line. Look at the backdrop." I squinted. The fence behind Hawthorne sat farther than the HOA map showed. If the photo lined up with what I thought it could mean, my lot was larger than Karen's clipboard allowed. At the front table, Briggs cleared his throat. "The board is setting a deadline. Payment of fines and compliance with bylaws must be achieved within 10 days. My gut sank. The words hung heavy like smoke after a fire, but the photograph in my hand sparked a different feeling. Hope, fragile, but real. I rose slowly, sliding the Polaroid into my pocket. "Mr. President," I said, my voice louder now, "I hereby request a formal hearing. Not here, not with just HOA maps. I ask for a public session at the town hall with the county survey office present and records displayed for all to see." The room hushed. Briggs's eyes narrowed. He flipped a page in his binder, weighing his next move. Finally, he said, "Very well. June 20th. Town hall. County survey office invited. Karen's smile spread too wide, brittle as glass, but gleaming like she'd won again. The Caldwells clapped once more. I felt the Polaroid's corners dig into my palm. I leaned toward Martha and whispered, "If this picture lines up, everything changes." That night, my kitchen table looked like a paper mill exploded fine notices, bylaw printouts, the old deed envelopes spreading like a map to nowhere. The cicadas sang through the open window, a restless drone that matched the way numbers tumbled in my head. Every fine was circled in red, each page stamped with the same blocky language about non-compliance, deadlines, escalation. The stack leaned like bricks, heavy enough to crush a man who'd only wanted to enjoy his porch in retirement. The radio hummed softly, an oldies station, crooning a tune from my firehouse days. The song should have comforted me, but tonight it sounded like a distant echo from another life. Martha had left a pie on the counter, pecan her specialty. It sat untouched, the crust glistening in the lamplight. My coffee had gone cold, tasting more like worry than caffeine. She sat across from me now, steady, her hands folded over the handle of her teacup. Watching, waiting, not pressing, but not leaving either. "You're staring at numbers," she said finally, "but numbers don't tell the whole story." She reached across, nudging the faded Polaroid so it slid across the deed envelope. The photo bumped the paper like a puzzle piece waiting to be placed. "Line these up, Henry. You've been looking at them separate. Put them together." I rubbed my temples. The photo of Hawthorne at that boundary post. The deed with the faint Lot 15A scrawled in the corner. My memory of Alvarez frowning at the maps. It all swirled, but refused to settle. Then my phone buzzed. The screen lit with Alvarez. I answered, voice rough. "This is Henry." His tone was careful, professional. "Mr. Mallory, I wanted you to know I've been reviewing the plats. The HOA's overlay map is out of date. Doesn't reflect county adjustments from the 80s. My chest tightened. "So, my driveway?" "It's not just that," he interrupted gently. "I found a parcel note. Lot 15A. It's adjoining. Recorded with the Hawthorne deed carried over to yours. HOA never updated their boundaries." The line went quiet. The cicadas filled the pause. I whispered it before I believed it. In her backyard. Martha's eyes flicked up wide. She reached for the Polaroid again, sliding it closer. "Look, Henry. Follow the fence line." I traced it with a trembling finger. Hawthorne's boot planted by a post grin wide, the fence stretching behind him. The angle was off, but clear enough. That post sat inside what Karen now called her patio. The stake in my yard, the Polaroid, the deed, all 3 points, formed a straight truth. Not just that my driveway wasn't in violation, but that the HOA maps had been wrong for decades. My breath shuddered out. Martha's hand covered mine. For the first time in weeks, the weight shifted. The papers on the table didn't feel like shackles. They felt like evidence. Then the phone rang again. Sheriff Langston's voice was steady low. "Town hall tomorrow, Henry. Bring every scrap pictures deed and that stake location. We'll have the county on projector. Time to put this in the open." I looked at the mess of papers, the pie waiting untouched, Martha's eyes steady on me. My hands finally steadied too. The town hall felt like revival night casseroles and the back flags at the front and a microphone standing in the middle like a witness. June heat followed folks in through the double doors and then collapsed in the cool air, leaving a sheen on foreheads and a murmur that sounded like hymn warm-ups. I'd come early enough to see the projector screen go up and to claim a seat near the center aisle where I wouldn't have to push past knees when it was my turn. A long folding table groaned under Pyrex dishes. The lady who made green bean casserole always wrote her name on masking tape so the pan returned home. The pot of decaf at the end steamed steadily, and I poured a small cup I didn't need more for my hands than for my throat. Sheriff Langston stood at the back with his arms folded, hat nested on a chair, the way a steady man fills a doorway without saying a word. I nodded to him. He tipped 2 fingers, and that was all the blessing I needed. I felt calm, not the quiet before panic, but the settled kind that comes when you've packed the truck, checked the hoses, and know exactly which line to pull. Karen swept in with her red suit bright as a stoplight. The fluorescent tubes made her clipboard flash like a badge. For a split second I remembered a promise I'd made to myself weeks ago, never again let a piece of plastic rule my life. Briggs followed, gavel in hand, expression measured. The Caldwells slid into the front row, suddenly whisper quiet, as if even they weren't sure which way the wind would blow. Behind them sat neighbors I'd shared ladders and jumper cables with. Some offered me small smiles, the kind you give a friend right before he speaks in church. Briggs brought us to order with a single knock. Item 4. He said, his voice pitched for the room, concerns the alleged driveway encroachment at Mr. Mallory's property. The association will present its findings, and then we will hear from the homeowner and any relevant county officials. He gestured to Karen. Mrs. Dutton. Karen approached the microphone like a soloist. She rested the clipboard on the lectern and held up a color printout. This is the Willow Creek Estates boundary map we've relied on for years, she announced. As you can see, she tapped a thick line with a manicured nail. Mr. Mallory's driveway extends beyond the permitted boundary. Our standards are reasonable and uniform, and when someone refuses to comply, we all suffer. She turned the printout to face the crowd. From where I sat, I could read the legend, the parcel outlines, and because old firefighters are trained to look for the detail that matters, the date in tiny type, 1987. A murmur. Someone coughed. Briggs raised a hand for quiet, but didn't scold. I stood when he nodded. If I may, I said, meeting the room with my eyes, I'd like the county file displayed. Alvarez wheeled a little cart forward. Laptop opened a USB cable looping to the projector like an oxygen line. He wasn't a showman, but he understood the weight of what would appear on that screen. We'll start with the current plat, he said. A crisp map bloomed on the wall parcels labeled bearings printed in neat numerals, a small symbol marking a metal stake. This is what the clerk's office certified as of last week. He clicked. Now the HOA version Mrs. Dutton submitted. The older diagram popped up. He hesitated just a second, then slid one over the other. Lines that should have kissed didn't meet. Boundaries shifted. The mismatch wasn't subtle. It was a gap you could drive daylight through. Gasps rippled. Aluminum chairs scraped. Briggs brought the gavel down once firm, not angry. Order, please. I walked to the document camera. The deed paper felt fragile under my fingers the way old truths do when you finally set them in light. I flattened it carefully so the lens could find the corner. This is my deed, I said. Recorded when I bought the house, carrying the notes from the Hawthorne transfer. Here, I pointed and the camera magnified the words until the room could have read them from the sidewalk. Parcel includes Lot 15A. Another low wave of whispers. The Caldwells glanced at each other, their certainty dimming like a bulb in a storm. Karen's smile stayed fixed, but I saw the muscles in her jaw tighten. Alvarez cleared his throat. If you'll look at the coordinate here, he said, moving the cursor to the little stake symbol, this aligns with the metal marker we unearthed on June 10th. County seal, original placement. When plotted against the deed's bearing, the point lands. He changed views. The overlay resolved into a sat photo silhouette of our block. The cursor pulsed. Right here. On the screen, the pulsing dot sat squarely inside the footprint of Karen's back patio. The line where my supposed encroachment began now crossed open air. My driveway, stubborn and ordinary, lay entirely within my own dirt. The room inhaled as one. In the pause, I could hear the projector's fan, a soft, mechanical breath. I stepped to the microphone and rested my index cards beneath it without reading. I knew the words by heart. Ma'am, you called the survey office on my driveway, I said, keeping my voice even. Turns out I've owned the land under part of your patio since before either of us moved in. The hush that followed was so complete I could make out the whir of the exit sign's transformer and the tiny hiss from the decaf urn. Karen reached for the clipboard as if to pull the room back into her orbit. This is outrageous, she said, color rising. We have always used that map. You can't spring some archival footnote and— It's not a footnote, Alvarez said, still calm. It's the recorded plat and chain of title. The HOA diagram you've relied on lacks county adjustments from 1987 and 1991. He glanced at Briggs. The county record stands. Briggs pressed his lips together, measuring. He wasn't a tyrant, just a man who loved a tidy binder and trusted the pages he'd inherited. Thank you, Mr. Alvarez, he said. The board will rescind the fines, someone called from the back. Laughter broke, then hushed again. Briggs lifted the gavel as if it weighed more than wood. I kept my hands on the lectern to keep them from becoming fists. For weeks I'd carried heat like a coal in the pocket. Now I felt something else, not triumph exactly, but the relief of air returning to lungs. I'm not asking for anyone's humiliation, I said. Just for the rules to serve the people who live under them. Martha, 3 rows up, dabbed at her eyes with a wadded napkin and said into the hush, "Here, here." Karen's veneer cracked. If his deed includes a phantom parcel, she said, then surely it's his duty to apply to the board to regularize it. She sounded less like a general and more like someone trying to renegotiate math. Briggs didn't answer. He looked past her to the sheriff. When the law in the room hasn't spoken, even boards with gavels go quiet. Langston unfolded his arms and took one unhurried step forward. He didn't reach for his hat. He didn't touch his badge. He didn't need to. "Mrs. Dutton," he said evenly, "you heard the county surveyor." She tried again, softer now. "Sheriff, this is association." I could feel the room tipping the way you sense a boat aligning with the current. Old firefighters read a crowd the way they read smoke, where it gathers which way it leans when it clears. All I had to do was stand still and let the truth breathe. Briggs tapped the gavel once more and set it down not as a threat but as a sign that he wouldn't swing it without looking at the law first. "We will take brief comments," he said. "Then I'll confer with counsel." The Caldwells didn't stand. They studied the screen as if the plat might decide to change its mind. A neighbor, 2 rows behind them, Mr. Garza, who'd lent me his ladder every spring, spoke up. If the map was wrong, we ought to say so out loud. Out loud, and on the minutes, Martha added. Karen's fingers dug into the clipboard, whitening at the knuckles. She had girded herself with its weight for months. Now it seemed heavier than she could lift. I breathed in the smell of casserole and floor wax and the paper tang of old deeds. For the first time since all this began, my shoulders found their proper place. I didn't need volume. I didn't need anger. The evidence did the talking. Briggs turned to me. "Mr. Mallory," he said, his voice more human than officer now, "thank you for bringing your documents." He looked down at the deed spread under the camera. "We'll recess for 10 minutes while counsel reviews the county file." I stepped back from the mic and the crowd parted the way people part when they've decided they like you after all. A hand touched my elbow, Martha pressing 2 peppermints into my palm like communion. "You spoke plain," she murmured. "Plain gets remembered." On the screen, the dot still pulsed over Karen's patio, steady as a heartbeat. I didn't look her way. I didn't need to. The town had turned its head where the truth pointed. I studied the index cards I hadn't read from and slid them into my pocket next to the deed copy, their edges familiar against my fingers. The sheriff moved at last, slow and deliberate, as Briggs and counsel huddled by the projector. He came down the aisle, boots quiet on the linoleum, and stopped where the front row could hear him without a microphone. His shoulders were level. His voice carried just enough to fill the room without striking it. Sheriff Langston leans forward. "Mrs. Dutton will sort this civilly," but continuing to find Henry over his own land, stops tonight. Karen's smile collapses. The clipboard dips. Morning light caught the broken clipboard sticking out of a clubhouse trash can. I didn't touch it. Some endings don't need help. I sat at the diner by the window, steam rising from a mug of coffee that never seemed to empty, thanks to a waitress with good timing. Martha sat across from me, her grin tucked behind the rim of her cup. Sheriff Langston had dropped in for his usual eggs and toast, nodding toward me like nothing special had happened. But I could feel the whole room leaning in half the town, pretending not to eavesdrop. The paper lay folded by my plate, the headline, small but solid, boundary clarified. HOA to review policies. I liked the size of it. Truth doesn't always need bold type. Outside, a moving truck idled in front of Karen's house. Cardboard boxes stacked on her porch rail like quiet apologies, the last of them marked fragile in thick black ink. The rumble of the engine carried through the glass as if to remind me change doesn't come with speeches, but with the sound of boxes sliding shut. Martha followed my gaze, then tapped her spoon against her cup. "You don't need to watch," she said. "Let her pack." I didn't answer, just unfolded the newspaper far enough to hide my smile. The sheriff polished off his plate and set down a $5 bill with the easy habit of a man who never let a waitress chase him down for change. As he passed our booth, he paused. "County clerk filed the addendum map this morning," he said, voice low. "Shouldn't be another inch of confusion now." He tipped his hat and walked out his boots, striking the tile in steady rhythm. Later that afternoon, we gathered at the clubhouse again, though this time it wasn't packed. No casseroles, no folding chairs jammed shoulder to shoulder, just the board at the front, a scattering of neighbors, and the smell of coffee still clinging to the urn. Briggs looked older, somehow. Binder thinner in front of him as if he'd stripped away every page that wasn't the law itself. He cleared his throat. "We have one item tonight," he said. "Motion to rescind all fines levied against Mr. Mallory, to remove Mrs. Dutton from her position on the board, and to amend bylaws to defer to county and state law in boundary disputes." The vote went fast, hands raised without hesitation. Even the Caldwells lifted theirs. When it was done, Briggs banged the gavel once. "No HOA action may exceed legal authority, period." For a moment, the room was quiet. Then a sigh moved through it like a breeze. You could almost feel yards widening fences, straightening lives, loosening from a grip they never asked for. The Caldwells caught me at the door. Mr. Caldwell's voice cracked a little when he said, "We backed the wrong horse, Henry. I'm sorry." His wife nodded, arms crossed, but eyes softer than I'd seen. I smiled and shook his hand. "We're neighbors. Let's start there." And that was enough. Back home, the air felt lighter, even the cicadas seemed to hum with less urgency. I spread my tools on the mantel, Martha helping with a hammer and level. The copy of the deed went into a simple frame, wood grain plain, but true. I hung it just above the fireplace where Hawthorne once kept his flight photos. Memories guarding boundaries, some lines deserved to be watched. Martha stepped back, tilted her head, and straightened the frame with one tap. "Level," she said. Her voice carried the satisfaction of a woman who had outlasted gossip and seen justice stitched neat. I sat on the couch, hands folded, and for the first time in weeks let myself breathe without counting fines in my head. The next morning found us at the diner again. The usual crowd, filled booths, coffee cups clinking like familiar bells. Martha tapped the window with her finger. Outside, Karen's lawn looked smaller now, her birdbath tilted in the early light. A box leaned against her porch rail marker, bleeding from the damp. Martha chuckled, soft but wicked. "You know, she said with that strip under her birdbath, now legally yours, you could make it a community birdbath, charge a nickel admission." I laughed, the kind that comes from deep in the chest, the kind that feels like a door finally swung open. Let's just call it shared shade. And with that, the matter felt done. No fireworks, no parades, just the clink of silverware, the hum of small-town conversation, and the quiet knowledge that justice doesn't need shouting when it's steady enough to stand on its own. The neighborhood found its rhythm again, softer now, as if the long summer heat had finally broken. What began with one voice standing against a false rule became a reminder that when power is misused, it is the community that suffers most. Justice, in the end, proved quieter than fear, steady like a hymn drifting from a church door on Sunday morning. And perhaps that is the truest lesson: when neighbors stand shoulder to shoulder, even the proudest clipboard can be set down for good.